Hey there, my wedding planning friends, and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, thank you so much for clicking on my video. I'm Emily Summer. I'm a wedding planner based in Montana, and I make weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice. Today's video is on a topic that I know is everyone's favorite, and that is budgeting for your wedding and wedding budgets as a whole. If you've watched any of my previous videos where I talk about wedding budgets or kind of the beginning stages of wedding planning at all, you know how big I am on making sure you have a categorized wedding budget as well as having your priorities set before beginning any of the real wedding plans. So today we're going to talk specifically about how to categorize that wedding budget and what is kind of reasonable and expected for each category to kind of give you a springboard to go off of when you are creating your wedding budget. So when it comes to budgeting for your wedding, you want to have your overall wedding budget. So that is the large number, that's your lump sum that you're going to spend in the entirety of your wedding. However, this is not the only number that you're going to use when you are budgeting for your wedding and signing contracts and paying invoices. You want to make sure that you are taking that large number, categorizing it so that you can allocate certain chunks of money to certain categories, and that's going to make your life a lot easier when it comes to deciding on vendors and making decisions as far as decor and florals, and just every piece of your wedding planning puzzle will be a little bit easier if you have a specific budget allocated to each category of your wedding. So what I mean by this is you will break down everything that you are going to spend money on for your wedding into categories and have a specific number attached to that category, and that will be your budget for each category. And then ultimately all those categories will add up to whatever your overall wedding budget is that you have set. So if you are somebody that has no idea what to even set as a wedding budget, maybe you have a lump sum that you know you can spend and you don't know really how to get there, or you have no idea what things even cost, that is the purpose of this video. So we're going to use a number as kind of our example overall budget, and I'll show you how to get to that overall number within your categories and kind of what I think is reasonable and expected for each category as well. So for this video, we're going to use the overall budget of $40,000. I would say this is pretty average for couples expecting around 100 guests at their wedding. Now, of course, there are going to be a ton of factors that go into this overall budget, so this number is not something that's going to make sense for everyone across the board. Your location, the type of wedding you're having, obviously your guest count, as well as your own personal priorities are going to play a huge role in how your overall budget is going to be categorized. So this video is simply to give you an example and kind of show you how you can break up and categorize each budget. So we'll start with the pieces of the puzzle that take the biggest chunk of your wedding budget. So typically the wedding venue is going to be the item that is the largest percentage of your overall budget. Most couples will spend about 20 to 25% of the overall wedding budget on their wedding venue. So for our $40,000 budget, this would mean spending around $8,000 to $10,000. Like I said, there's a lot of factors that go into this, and depending on your location or the type of venue you want to have, there's a large chance that you can get this lowered as well. Another thing to take into account when it comes to venues and kind of allocating your budget percentages for this is the venue going to be all inclusive? Are they going to have tables and chairs added in? Are they going to have catering included? These can affect how you are categorizing your budget. If your venue does provide catering as well, I still recommend budgeting for that separately. So make sure that this venue is just the venue price and whatever you're getting within the venue, and separate the catering for a separate category. If your venue does provide you with tables and chairs, then that will affect your rental category, which we'll get to, and you'll be able to kind of lower the percentage for that category and be able to allocate a little bit more into your venue or somewhere else. So keep that in mind, as that's kind of the sliding scale that could change when it comes to categorizing certain pieces of your budget. So venue is going to be at the top there, and then typically food and beverage is your next highest cost. Again, lots of factors that go into this as far as the type of food you're going to be catering. Obviously, your guest count is going to play a massive role in this overall price. Typically, 15 to 20% is a good starting place for budgeting your food and drink. So this is for appetizers, dinner, alcohol, your bar, cake and dessert. I like to have that separate, so it's not included in this food and beverage category, but 15 to 20% of a $40,000 budget would put you at about $6,000 to $8,000, which again is doable if you are having a guest count of about 100 or less and having a bar that's probably beer and wine and maybe signature cocktails, not fully stocked. So again, lots of factors that can go into that. Kind of a 15 to 20% of your overall budget is a good starting point to work off of. Next would be photo and video. Most couples will spend about 10 to 15% of their overall budget on a photographer and or videographer, which would bring us to about $4,000 to $6,000 for this category. Wedding attire. So as a whole, this will include your wedding dress and accessories, as well as the groom's attire if there is a groom, and then any bridal party attire that you will be paying for. So if your bridesmaids are going to be paying for their own dresses, you don't need to include this in your budget. If your groomsmen are paying for their own suits, don't need to include this in this budget. So this is just for whatever you are planning to pay for when it comes to your attire. Again, this could vary depending on what your priority is. If you're somebody that really doesn't care all that much about the dress, if it's not something that you're wanting to spend that much money on, then this is going to be on the lower end. But if the dress is very important to you, this is something that you do want to spend money on, probably slide this up to the higher end and maybe take from a percentage elsewhere. So on average, most couples will spend 5 to 7% of the overall budget on wedding attire, which would bring us to $2,000 to $2,800. $2,000 for a wedding dress is pretty doable these days. You're obviously going to be limited a little bit, and your location is going to play a big role in this. Here in my store, a lot of my brides will come in with a $2,000 budget. That's pretty normal, and I would say that's pretty mid-range for what we carry, and there's a really large selection to be able to stay under that $2,000 budget. Most groomsmen or most grooms' suits will be between like $180 and $300, I would say, for a full like tuxedo set, shoes, everything included. So that's kind of what to estimate when it comes to that side of the attire things. And then you also want to have a budget for beauty, so any hair and makeup services that you plan to have. And again, this will vary based on what you are planning to pay for. If it's just going to be for yourself, if it's going to be for any additional bridal party members or family members, on average, this is usually about 2 to 3% of the overall budget, which would be $800 to $1,200. So if you are having a larger bridal party that you're going to be spending money on, then you're probably going to need to go a little bit higher and take the percentage from somewhere else. Stationery, this is your save the dates, your wedding invites, your postage, any printed stationery menus, signage, anything that you're going to have printed on paper form of some kind for your wedding. This is typically about 5% of the overall budget, which again is about $2,000 for our $40,000 budget. Music and entertainment, most couples will spend again about $5,000, which is this $2,000 mark for our $40,000 budget. Most DJs will work within that price. If you are planning on having any live music, then this can be over that price. If you're having a full band for a reception, if you're doing a live music and DJ combo, you're probably going to be spending more than that. So keep that in mind as you are breaking down this budget. Dessert, so if you're having a wedding cake or maybe a variety of desserts, this is again about 5% of the overall budget, or $2,000 for us. There's a lot of ways you can kind of finagle this budget. If you're having just one cutting cake, you can typically get it for under this price, depending on your guest count and how large the cake is going to be. Again, varietal of desserts. There's a lot of ways that you can kind of adjust this price. So this is a good category. If you don't have a huge preference on what you want for dessert, this is a good category to kind of use as your buffer marker and be able to take from a little bit if you need to add somewhere else. Then we have decor. So I typically like to have an overall budget for your decor category as a whole, and then go in and break down into subcategories within your decors. Overall, decor is usually about 15 to 20% of your overall budget. Again, this will vary across couples and what their priorities are, as well as your venue location. If you're getting married somewhere super scenic, you probably don't need to bring in a lot of things in the way of decor. Also, if your venue is more all-inclusive as far as they already have tables and chairs, maybe even rentals available like tabletop rentals, then this is going to eliminate the need to have a higher percentage within this category. So within your decor category, you will have your flowers, your rentals, and then any extra decor. So let's talk flowers first. Flowers typically is about 6 to 8% of the overall wedding budget, which would give us $2,400 to $3,200 for our $40,000 budget. This is doable. I will say the majority of my couples will spend at least $4,000 on wedding flowers, and this is for like having a full arch, having some ceremony aisle florals, bridal bouquet, bridesmaids bouquets, groomsmen boutonnieres, and centerpieces at the reception. So again, lots of factors into this, mostly the guest count and how many florals you'll need in general. Maybe going more a la carte services, that's definitely going to bring that price down if you are trying to bring that percentage down somewhere. But that's something that might be on a sliding scale for you as well. Next is rentals. This is anything that you would need to rent to bring in, most commonly tabletop items, so plates, flatware, glassware, napkins, tables and chairs if you need them. Obviously, if you need to bring in everything, tables, chairs, linens, rental, tabletop rentals, all of that, this is going to be on the higher end for you. Also, if you need to rent a tent, this is going to be much higher for you. On average, about 3% of the overall budget is what most couples will spend, which gives us about $1,200 to work with, which I would say this is pretty doable for couples that are doing all of their tabletop rentals and napkin rentals and just kind of basic rentals. Depending on how many guests you have and how many tables you need, this could include tables, but that might be cutting it a little bit close. And then you have your miscellaneous extra decor if you need it, which is another 3%, which is another $1,200. So maybe you don't need this at all. Maybe there's no extra decor you plan on bringing in as far as like candles or soft seating, lounge area, or anything extra that you need to bring in and rent. This is kind of that extra category for that. Transportation, if you plan on having any shuttles for your guests or transportation for yourselves at the end of the night or for your bridal party to and from ceremony or in between locations, if you have if you have a separate ceremony and reception location, transportation is typically at 5% of the overall budget, which is again $2,000 for us. And then you also want to make sure that you are allocating a small percentage of your budget for tips that you're going to be spending at the end, typically like on your wedding day, and usually about 2% of your overall budget. And then I always recommend having a miscellaneous buffer category. So anything that might end up being more than you were budgeting for, anything last minute that comes up that you might need extra of or didn't think about, or maybe you plan to get it for free somehow and then now you have to pay for it. Having a 1 to 2% miscellaneous category from your overall budget is going to help from any going over budget and any stress regarding your wedding budget. Creating a detailed wedding budget, I know it does not sound that fun. It's probably the least glamorous part of wedding planning, but if you take the time to sit down and create a categorized, detailed budget, I promise it's going to make your wedding planning a lot less stressful and save you from going over budget at your wedding. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe to get weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice, and we'll see you next week.